Today we talk about how much sperm is enough. I'm Dr. Mark Amols, and this is Taco Bout Fertility Tuesday. I'm sure if you walked in a room one time and were told that your partner had a bunch of sperm, sometimes millions, 80 million, 100 million. I mean, what are they doing? Showing off? How much do you need to get pregnant? Well, in today's episode of Taco Bout Fertility Tuesday, we're going to talk about that. If you listened to some of my podcasts in the past, you probably heard me make the joke that men, although they feel very strong for making lots of sperm, what they don't realize is they don't make a lot of sperm because they're doing it well. They make a lot of sperm because they're so bad at it, they need to make that many sperm to get a good one. And you think of this as kind of insane. I mean, you work so hard to make one egg per month, this beautiful, perfect egg. And here it is, they have this shotgun approach of millions of sperm and like, hey, maybe one will get there. The amazing thing is that most doctors don't know how much sperm needs to be there. No, I'm not talking about fertility doctors. I'm talking about other doctors, even OBGYNs. I've even had urologists not know how much sperm is supposed to be there because they're not fertility doctors. They know what sperm levels are normal, but they've never taken care of patients trying to get pregnant for years and years. They've never seen people with a sperm count of only 5 million and never get pregnant in their entire life. Yet in their mind, they see that much, go, well, that's pretty good. You should be able to get pregnant. And they're wrong. So one important thing about this podcast is, I don't care if your urologist told you it's normal or if your OBGYN told you it's normal. Unless a fertility doctor tells you that the numbers you have are good, I would not trust the people telling you. Not because they're not smart, but because there's a big difference of spending your entire career seeing values and then knowing outcomes versus people reading a book. So we're going to be talking about 3 specific situations. The first is natural. How much sperm do you need to get pregnant naturally? The second, we're going to talk about artificial inseminations. And the third is going to be IVF. Now, I think it's important to know you can't make too much sperm. There's not like men out there making 1 billion sperm and not getting pregnant because they're just too much sperm they're making. But there can be too little. The numbers you want to remember are 20, 10, and 5. 20 represents the amount of total moving sperm you must have to get pregnant naturally. 10 is what you need to be at to be able to get pregnant with artificial inseminations, also called IUIs. And if it's under 5 million, you need to do IVF, just like if it's under 10, but now you need to do a process called ICSI, intracytoplasmic sperm injection. Now, I made that sound simple, and you're probably all fertility doctors now. But it's not that simple. So let's go to the 20 million part first. What does it mean to have total motile count? What that's saying is, if you take the volume of your sperm, multiply it by the concentration, multiply it by the motility, you get the total motile count. So if you have 100 million sperm total, but the concentration is 20 million sperm, that means you have 5 milliliters of sperm times 20 to get 100 million count. Then you multiply that by the motility, which let's say is 50%, and now you're left with 50 million sperm. If you do that calculation, you need at least 20 million total motile sperm to be able to get pregnant naturally. But there's more to it, because if the sperm has poor motility, then you may not get pregnant. Same thing if it has poor progressive motility. So let's talk about a situation like that. Let's say you had 100 million concentration and you still have 5 milliliters sperm. That would give you 500 million sperm. But what if we found out that the motility was only 10%? Well, then in that situation, you still have 50 million sperm, the exact same amount of sperm before, but now you're not going to get pregnant. Now, why? Because of the motility. When you have that severe motility, it doesn't matter what the total count is. At that point, it's going to be too hard to get pregnant and you probably won't get pregnant. This is why there are home tests that will tell someone their sperm count is normal, but they can't get pregnant, because the home test is looking only at the count and may not be looking at these other parameters such as progressive motility, which is the way the sperm moves. So the next situation is what are called IUIs, intrauterine insemination. And most of the time before you start your IUI process, when you're in the room and they're getting ready to put the sperm in, they'll tell you how much sperm was made and what they did and cleaned it. And at first you'll hear a number and it doesn't sound like much, but it's important to understand this is what's called a post-wash sample, meaning the sperm that was ejaculated could have been 50 million, but after cleaning it, now they have the best of the best sperm. These are the Katie Ledeckis, the Michael Phelps of sperm. But the count's going to be lower. And the question is, how much is too low? Now, we like to see between about 5 and 10 million sperm total moving for an IUI. If it's 5 million, don't be worried. I get people worried all the time going, well, last time it was 10 million or last time it was 14. As long as it's 5 million, you have plenty. Naturally, with intercourse, only 100,000 sperm get into the uterus. So putting in 5 million is still a lot, and thousands of sperm will get to the egg. And remember, there's not 1,000 eggs there, so there's plenty of sperm per egg. But what about if it's less than 5 million? Well, what I've found is, as long as there's 3 million, there's really not that big of a drop. Maybe it's a little drop, but very small, maybe a percentage or two. So I don't even get worried as long as there's at least 3 million sperm. But then when you start getting less than 3 million, you really start to see a decrease in the success of IUIs. And I would say when you get below 1, it becomes severely low chances of getting pregnant with IUI. Not 0, but severely low. In one of my podcasts, I talked about this patient who told me her husband's sperm, although it was low count, was really good at swimming. And I kind of laughed at it thinking, the guy makes less than 1 million sperm. And she says, every doctor keeps saying this and doesn't want to do IUIs with us, but I promise you, we'll get pregnant. And so I did it. And funny enough, very first IUI, they got pregnant. Now, does this mean you should do multiple IUIs with less than 1 million sperm? No. I think for most patients, you should go on to IVF. But if you are one of those unique people who happen to get pregnant on an IUI with very low sperm, when you tried that one time because you're like, what the heck, let's just do it today. Well, then in the future, you know that you might be able to get away with that, like the couple I saw. But in the end, you really want to be 5 to 10 million, again, or higher. But if you're below that 5 million, at that point, you want to talk to your doctor about other options, such as IVF, such as seeing a urologist, or other options. The last situation is IVF. Now with IVF, this is a situation where you can almost have no sperm and still get pregnant. Now clearly if you have 0 sperm, it's impossible. But I've got people pregnant with 5 sperm. It's very unusual to have just 5 sperm, but the point is, that's how few we can have, and someone can still get pregnant. Now, it's important to understand that when you have fewer sperm, there's usually a reason, and it could affect the quality of the sperm, which is one of the reasons why you have so few of it. And it can hurt your chances of getting pregnant. But in the end, for IVF, anytime anyone has less than 10 million total motile count, we usually recommend moving on to in vitro fertilization. Now, if it's under 5 million, then at that point, we even recommend the process called ICSI, intracytoplasmic sperm injection. The difference between the two is in standard fertilization, we're just putting the sperm on the egg and letting it do its thing. And we usually put about 50,000 sperm per egg for the concentration. However, when the count is less than 5 million, there's a risk of poor fertilization. And for that reason, what we do is we recommend injecting the sperm into the egg. Now, like I've talked about in other podcasts, injecting the sperm only makes sure the sperm gets in the egg. It does not verify fertilization. That is between the egg and the sperm that occurs. But if the count is that low, it would be worth doing ICSI. Now the question is, how low can you get? Well, as I mentioned, as low as 5 sperm can get you pregnant. Now, we always want more than that because it makes it easier on us to pick the best sperm. But the point is, as long as you have some sperm, usually people can get pregnant with IVF. Being myself a patient with low sperm count, I am very thankful for IVF and very thankful for ICSI. I can truly say I would have never been a father if it wasn't for IVF, if it wasn't for ICSI. And I'm extremely thankful to the people who came up with this technology to allow me to have kids. So if you're like me and your partner or you're a gentleman listening to this and you got a semen analysis and found the counts were low, this may give you some insight on what you can do. Another situation to use these counts are when you're freezing sperm. If you have a cancer and you need to freeze sperm, this should give you a general idea of how many vials you need to make to be able to try naturally with artificial inseminations or IVF. Hopefully this was helpful to someone. If you enjoyed these podcasts, as I always say, please tell your friends about them. Give us 5-star reviews on your favorite medium and let me know. I look forward to talking to you guys again next week on Taco Bout Fertility Tuesday.